Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Minto Schneider, and I am the chair of Meetings Mean Business Canada. And I'd like to welcome you to our second webinar on visas for international and domestic business events in Canada. First of all, I want to recognize our partners in hosting today's webinar, the Canadian Association of Exposition Management, TIAC, Convention Centres of Canada, Meetings Mean Business Canada, the Canadian Destination Leadership Council, and Destination Canada. We're very pleased to have Jacqueline Young and Matthew Jeunesse, Senior Program Advisors at IRCC Special Events Services with us today. Jacqueline and Matthew are part of the team that supports organizers of events hosted in Canada by acting as a single point of contact for communications with IRCC. They provide information on Canada's visa and entry requirements and work with organizers and IRCC's networks to coordinate the processing of visas. Welcome, Jacqueline and Matthew, and thank you for being with us today. Before I pass the floor to Jacqueline and Matthew, I want to provide a few housekeeping notes for today. The presentation will be about 30 minutes, and we will take questions following the presentation. Please put your questions in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. Today, we will not be talking about study permits, work permits, asylum seekers, government or diplomatic events. And Jacqueline and Matthew cannot speak to any specific events, but they will give you contact information for someone that can answer questions on specific events at the end of the presentation. With that, thank you for joining us today, and I'm going to pass the floor to Jacqueline and Matthew.
Thank you, Minto. And hello, everyone. So before we start, I just wanted to thank you all for being here with us today and for giving us a few minutes to speak with you all. I think following the last session, there was a lot of engagement and good feedback back in June. So we're just hoping to build on that a little bit today and continue this relationship moving forward. I'll pass the mic over to my colleague, Jackie, in a couple minutes, who will provide us with more of an overview of the special events team at IRCC and how they can support organizers looking to hold events in Canada. I think before we do that, though, it's important to provide you with a bit of background to understand kind of where we currently are in terms of IRCC as a whole. So I think we'll start with that. And then again, like Minto mentioned, there will be a Q&A period at the end. So if anything's unclear throughout either my presentation or Jackie's, I would invite you to throw that in the Q&A box below. It's funny, we're in 2023 now and we're still referring to the pandemic. And I think that kind of just shows of how much of an impact it had across the world. So during the pandemic, obviously processing times increased in most programs due to COVID's impact on the department, the applicants and the partners. So for those of you who don't know, due to international travel restrictions and border closures, IRCC was unable to process or finalize most TRV applications for approximately an 18-month period, as most visitors were not allowed into the country. However, during that time, the intake of TRV applications continued. So obviously, when we're not processing any applications, but they continue to come into the system, I'm sure you can imagine that would build quite the inventory. So it really did create an unprecedented volume of applications in our processing inventory. While many of those initial disruptions have been resolved, IRCC continues to face the long-term impacts of these events on our processing inventories. And I'll speak to that a little bit more in a second here. But I think I should also mention that as part of the post-pandemic recovery, IRCC has implemented various initiatives to reduce application backlogs. Some of those include exploring different digital electronically, further virtual work sharing through our global network. So obviously trying to reduce some of those paper applications. As we move towards a more virtual work world, obviously electronic applications allows us to do those remotely as well. Hiring additional employees in 2022, aided by an $85 million funding for backlog reduction. An additional investment of 74.6 million over 5 years to improve application processing has also been announced as part of Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy. And then more recently, what some of you might have seen, as of June 6, 2023, 13 more countries have been added to the partial visa exempt countries list. What that means is that now travelers from 67 countries can apply for an ETA, or an electronic travel authorization, instead of a visa. Our process and can result in your application being approved within minutes of submission. So I will share a quick slide here that just shows the kind of the difference between the visa required travelers and the ETA eligible travelers. The information is also available on our website, and I would encourage anybody to go to our website to get more information about who might be visa required versus ETA requirements. There is also a online tool where you can kind of find out whether or not you're going to need a visa to travel to Canada. So a very handy tool would ask you a few quick questions, and then that would determine whether or not you would require a visa or potentially an ETA. So that being said, I think we are making some we are making some improvements, and we are taking steps towards reducing those application backlogs that we saw as a result of COVID. There are still two main factors that have prolonged our recovery plan. I would say the first one, which is probably the most or the biggest one, would be the unprecedented interest in Canada from applicants all over the world. So when comparing 2023 year to date, so unfortunately it's not right up to date. So this is January to October 2023 versus that same period last year. So if we're comparing January to October, so the first 10 months of 2023 versus 2022, Canada has seen an increase of approximately 900,000 temporary resident visa applications received. So that is approximately a 49.5% increase of what we saw versus the same period last year. To put that into maybe more numbers, and just to understand kind of how many applications are received, so far this year, IRCC has received a total of approximately 3 million TRV applications. So we're dealing with some very, very large numbers. A lot of people who want to come to Canada, and like I said at the beginning, it really is unprecedented how many people are currently applying to come to Canada. Just going to stop sharing that screen because I think it might be slowing down my connection a little bit. So I'll speak a little bit more to the processing inventories and backlogs a little bit later in the presentation. But the other thing that I think has prolonged our recovery plan is the growing number of humanitarian crises and displaced people, as well as the complexity and urgency of our responses continue to challenge capacity. So for example, on that one, following the launch of the Russian war on Ukraine, over 1 million applications were received under the Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel. I think what's to note there is that we only had an original forecast of 300,000. So obviously that's an additional 700,000 or so applications that are kind of going into our inventory that we did not necessarily account for. With the reopening of our border and borders worldwide in the spring of 2022, we continue to focus on key services, adjusting plans to address our inventories and address existing and new priorities of the Government of Canada. If anything, the pandemic has demonstrated just how critical immigration is to Canada. Our ability to welcome people from around the world will continue to contribute greatly to our economy, society, culture, as well as our place in the world. And we know here at IRCC that the work that you do to promote Canada as a top destination for events and conferences directly contributes to Canada's economy, society, culture, and Canada's place in the world. That's in part of the reason why we modified the special events registration period from 3 months to 6 months. We know the importance of ensuring that a maximum of visa applications for events be processed and that participants receive their travel documents in time for the event. That being said, I will say that we are always looking at the feasibility of whether or not we are in a position to reduce that timeline to better serve event organizers. So I'm not going to sit here today and promise you that we will be reducing that timeline, but I will say that it's definitely on our radar and something that we're always kind of looking to explore and balance with the processing timelines and making sure that if we do that, that we are able to deliver and that applications are processed in time for the event start date. I think the department has made great strides these past few months with regards to service standards and processing time, as well as making internal changes in how we work with our network partners to streamline special events. And we're going to continue building on that. We are hopeful that we will soon be in a position to lower the number of months required ahead of an event or conference. So as I mentioned earlier, I think once we do that, everyone will be notified. Our website will be updated, and I think we'll make sure that everybody is aware of that. In terms of the inventory of temporary resident visa applications, what I will say is that we have seen an increase in temporary resident visa applications in our queue, if you want to call it. So the increase has went from 691,000 to 722,000 when comparing to this time last year. So approximately a 30,000 or so application increase in that time. I think what's important to note is when we go back to what I mentioned earlier is that during this time, we have seen an increase of 49.5% in TRV applications when compared to last year. So I believe the number was about 700,000 additional or 900,000 additional applications. And during that time, we've been able to limit the number of applications in the processing queue to only a 4.5% increase. So while there has been an increase, I think given the situation and given the unprecedented interest in coming to Canada and the number of applications that we are receiving, I think we've managed to change quite well. Obviously, there is still an opportunity to further reduce that, but I think overall we are in a good position. With that, I hope it gives you kind of a good sense of how we got where we are today and where we're going. And then I think I'll throw it over to Jackie, who's going to give you a little bit more information about special event registration and processing. And yeah, Jackie, over to you.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. So my name is Jacqueline Jung, and I'll be speaking for the second part of this presentation. So to begin, I will outline what I'll be covering. First, I'll provide an overview of what the special event team does and the benefits of registering your event, what the team does not do, what the registration process consists of, and by that I mean how to register an event, the visa application process, where things might go a little bit wrong, as well as some trends that we have noticed. So I'll start off with what the special event team does and why it's beneficial to register your event. So the special events team acts as a single point of contact between IRCC and the organizers of international events being hosted in Canada. We provide resources and guidance to event organizers on the visa and ETA application process, biometrics, as well as entry requirements. We also support the development of visa-related communications, whether that is information about the visa application process or helping organizers with their invitation letters. We also help coordinate the processing of applications to participants of international events. So what this means is that we will notify our processing networks of upcoming events in order so that those applications can be coordinated in line with the event start date. We also can, upon request, provide aggregate data on the number of visa applications IRCC receives for the event, as well as their status. This can help give organizers a quick snapshot of how the processing for their event is progressing. And it may also prompt organizers to sort of encourage their delegates to apply for their visa applications if necessary. If organizers have any questions regarding the visa or entry requirements to Canada for the participants, we're always happy to respond to those and provide any information that's necessary. We also work alongside our other government departments as well as our central agencies for events. So for instance, specifically the Canada Border Services Agency, we work with them to help event organizers get information on how to import goods in case they do need them for their event. So now that we know a little bit about what the team does and why it's beneficial to register your event, I will go over what the special events team does not do. So first and foremost, the special events team does not register an event without first having received an international event or meeting form. So organizers can submit this form online, and they must do so in order for their event to be considered. I will say that the registering an event with the special event team and using the special event code does not mean that one's visa application will receive expedited processing. In fact, the special events team does not process applications, nor do we influence our decision makers, and we cannot prioritize or waive requirements for any event participants. As I mentioned previously, the team does not expedite processing, and participants are still required to meet all eligibility and admissibility requirements. Another thing is that we do not communicate directly with participants. We only communicate with event organizers. Our email is available to the public on our website. However, we would prefer if we just communicate with the organizers. And due to privacy reasons, we can never share case-specific details on applications. But as I mentioned previously, we are able to provide aggregate data, and that will give organizers an idea of the total number of applications that were submitted, whether they're refused, approved, withdrawn, or in progress. All right, so I'm going to go over now the registration process. Matt, if it's possible, could you please share my slide? Perfect. Okay, so the first step in the registration process is for the organizer to complete and submit the notice of an international event or meeting form. And this must be done at least 6 months before the start of the event. This form can be located on our website, and we can provide the links at the end of the presentation. At that point, the special events team will conduct an assessment of the event to ensure that it is legitimate and that it meets our criteria. For instance, if an event is taking place less than 6 months since the application form was submitted, or it has less than 10 visa required delegates, the registration request will be screened out. And once the team has vetted the application, we will request a sample letter of invitation and issue a registration confirmation email. The organizer can then submit their sample letter of invitation, and then we will send a special event code. As I mentioned before, having this code and using it on one's application does not mean that it will receive expedited processing. The special event code allows us to identify applications from participants and ensure that they are being processed in a coordinated manner, take into consideration the start date of the event. The next step as an organizer is to encourage applications by participants from visa required countries, and also to provide IRCC with application numbers for the delegates. Providing up-to-date participant names and visa application numbers is important for us to help coordinate processing of applications. Another important piece for organizers is that they can provide us with a list of VIPs. These are clients or participants who are essential to the success of your event. For instance, these can be people like keynote speakers. And these participants can be prioritized within the cohort of applicants associated to your event. Now, once the event has been registered with IRCC, this is now where we move towards the application process. So now I will explain the visa application process. So once the participant has registered with your event, the organizer will provide them with a special event code, as well as instructions on how to apply using that code when they apply for their visa. We strongly encourage applicants to apply at least 3 months out. We also encourage organizers to keep in contact with us in case they have any information or questions regarding processing. Again, keeping in mind that application-specific information cannot be shared. If the organizer needs support, or if they're made aware of any issues with participants, or that they're having issues with applying, it's important that you communicate that with us ASAP. As I mentioned previously, while we can't overturn or influence decisions, we can share pertinent information with our processing networks. Once the participant has submitted their application to IRCC, they will receive a letter notifying them that they need to submit their biometrics. Biometrics have been a requirement for approximately 6 to 7 years, and biometrics that are enrolled for the purpose of a visa are valid for 10 years. If a participant has not yet enrolled their biometrics, they will receive a biometric instruction letter after they submit their application. Biometrics consist of a photograph as well as recording fingerprints. Therefore, they must be done in person. Biometrics can be done at any visa application center around the world. IRCC's visa application center network is actually quite extensive, and it consists of approximately 167 locations in 112 countries. Obviously, while it would be ideal to have VACs in every country, this is unfortunately not possible. So some delegates may need to travel in order to enroll their biometrics. It's important to note as well that processing for applications cannot begin until biometrics are enrolled. That is why it's important for delegates to schedule their biometric appointments as soon as possible. Once biometrics are registered, an officer will review their application, and if the application is approved, the clients will be requested to submit their passport so that the visa can be physically affixed inside. Participants cannot board a plane without a visa, nor can visas be issued at the port of entry once they arrive to Canada. Again, delegates will use the VACs to transmit their passports to the closest embassy for visa issuance, and then their passports will be returned, and then they can begin their travels. VACs also offer courier services, and this is a great way to ensure that passport transmission is being tracked. All right, so now where things might get a little bit troublesome and where things can go awry. So one of the big issues we see is when there are late registrations. So this can mean that clients are either late to register as a participant for the event, or they're late in submitting their visa application to IRCC. Our best advice that we can give is to encourage participants to register to the event as soon as possible, encourage those who need to apply for a visa to apply as soon as possible, and to encourage organizers to keep track of those who do apply. We strongly encourage applicants to apply at least 3 months out. And I know that may seem like a lot of time, but parts of the application process can take a little longer than others. For instance, it may take time to schedule a biometrics appointment. Some VACs are busier than others, and it largely depends on the location as well as the time of year. For instance, leading up into the summer, everybody goes on vacation. There are a lot of appointments. There are a lot of people trying to come to Canada, so they would need to enroll their biometrics. It may also take time to travel to a VAC to submit biometrics. If one of the participants is in a country that does not have a VAC, they may have to travel a little bit to submit their biometrics. IRCC may also request additional information, and this can take time to collect and for participants to submit it online. It may also take some time to submit the passport and to have the visa affixed inside and then return to the applicant. Organizers should also keep track of those who do apply. So although you may have registered for your event 6 months out, we recommend that you keep track of applicants so that there are no surprises a few weeks out before the event, and off chance that organizers are anticipating, say, 100 delegates to have applied for their visa, when in reality, there may only be like 25. Another issue that we often see is when people apply without the special event code. So this hinders processing and the coordination of visa processing when clients do not apply with the special event code. It's extremely important that they follow the instructions that organizers provide and that we would have provided on how to insert the code into their application to ensure that we can identify their applications in our vast inventory of TRV applications. Another issue is individuals who, when participants do not monitor or respond to IRCC requests for biometric enrollment and passport submission requests. Applicants need to respond to those ASAP to ensure passports and visas are issued in time for the event. They may also be asked to provide additional information to determine eligibility or admissibility. And background and security checks can create additional delays in the application process. So it is important that people respond to these as soon as possible. Their next issue we notice is when participants are relying solely on visa invitation letters to substantiate their purpose of travel, their proof of funds, and their intent to return after their stay in Canada. So while the invitation letter or visa assistance letter that organizers provide participants in support of their application is important, there are other factors that need to be considered. It's important that applicants provide all the information that is requested by IRCC in order to substantiate their purpose of travel. Lastly, I will discuss some quick trends that we are noticing. The first trend is the use of fraudulent invitation letters or letters that have been altered. So organizers will provide invitation letters to participants to submit their application. However, some of these letters, sometimes they get into the wrong hands and alterations are done to reflect someone else's information. Then that person will use the letter to apply for a TRV, even though they're not actually registered for the event. Given technology these days, a lot of these alterations are well done and they're very difficult to detect. That is why, as an organizer, it's important to provide IRCC with the list of registered participants to your event. So while officers do review the letter that is submitted with the visa application, they will also refer to the list provided to confirm a participant's registration. Another trend is the credit card chargebacks. So some participants may be registered or registering by using or paying the registration fees with someone else's credit card. Once they are registered and they receive the invitation letter and special event code, then the rightful owner of the credit card will see the charge on their card, and then they will put in a claim with the credit card company. The event organizers will then be charged for the registration, meaning the registration will now be canceled, but the person who has applied with the credit card may have already received their TRV or may have just applied. So that is why it's important for organizers to stay in contact with us and to let us know of any types of chargebacks that they see or trends that they see in their registrations. So thank you very much. I will pass it back to Matt just for some quick closing remarks.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, so we'll move over to the Q&A period in a moment. I hope you learned more about the special event team and the registration process. Before going to the Q&A, though, I just wanted to kind of summarize a few key points that we mentioned today. So I think the first one is I'm going to kind of use this as a plug to promote our team. So special events team is a service offered by RCC to support event organizers with the visa processing of applicants. I would strongly suggest anyone who is looking to host an event in Canada, that includes the participation of international delegates, that you reach out to our team for additional information on how we might be able to assist you. Obviously, the best way to do that would be by filling out a web form to register the event, as Jackie alluded to, but there is also our email address, which let me throw it on the screen here. Give me 1 second. I'll leave it up there for a second just for people to be able to write it down, or I don't know if Minto, if you could share that afterwards, but regardless, it's not very complicated. special.events@cic.gc.ca. So if you have any questions at all about either the planning or if you're looking to host an event or really anything that has to do with an event being held in Canada that might require visas, people coming internationally, please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to assist. I think the other thing I wanted to just kind of touch on is where we need your support is by encouraging your participants to apply as early as possible for their visas. I can't stress enough the importance of this point. So while we do everything we can to ensure processing timelines do not interfere with event start dates, the best way to avoid that issue altogether is to encourage people to apply a minimum, and I say minimum of 12 weeks in advance of their travel date. Again, I want to specify travel date versus event start date. So if somebody is looking to come in a day or two before the event, I think it's important that they keep that date in mind when submitting their application. And then I'll just finish by mentioning that we continue to work towards reducing our processing timelines. I know it could be extremely frustrating. We realize there's an opportunity to be better, but the reality is that we're seeing a unprecedented number of people looking to come to Canada, and we'll continue to do our best to reduce those timelines. So now, Minto, is it okay if I throw it back over to you for the Q&A period?
It is. And thank you, Matthew and Jackie. That was fantastic. Matthew, I'm going to ask you to put your screen back up and add a link to the
Yes.
site, the website, because that is the first
Yeah.
question. We have 15 questions. So that's number one. If you can put your website link, that would be great.
Yeah, the website link, the website link for our special events, or are you referring to the one that I would have talked about earlier with Visa Require, just for special events in general?
For special events in general.
Okay, let me just
Great.
get that, and then I'll throw it back up.
All right, thank you. And while you're doing that, the next question is, what is the current delay for event organizers to receive their IRCC event code after filling out the online form?
So while Matt takes care of that, I can respond to this question. So it can take upwards of 10 business days to receive a response from IRCC Special Event Unit regarding the decision made on their request.
Great. Next question. How can we?
Can I just, before we go there, sorry,
go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, can I just, for the link to the website, I don't know, is there a way we can throw it in a chat or something? It's just a very long link, so I don't know if it would be very helpful for me to throw it on the link, or is there a way we could share it with all the participants after the call?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I think that would be easier because people will spend the rest of the webinar just writing down the link. So let's do that.
We could definitely do that. The next question, how can we access the information on the number of visa applications that have been submitted for our event?
All right, you can send a request for an aggregate update to our special event inbox. And this aggregate update will include the number of visa applications that are approved, refused, withdrawn, and in progress.
Great. How do we check the status of our registration application of our event to the IRCC?
You can follow up by just sending us a quick email.
Okay.
And we will respond as soon as we can.
And are we assigned a specific agent to provide up-to-date lists of participants and application numbers? How often should we be providing this data?
So yes, an employee on the IRCC Special Event Services team will be assigned to the event, and they can provide support and updates to the event organizer whenever needed.
Great. Matthew, I sent a question to you. Can you please respond to that one? And maybe you want to read out the question too.
Yeah, sure. So a French question. I'll respond in French and in English for everyone.
Okay.
So the question was, merci de protéger nos frontières, continuez. Le plus grand problème est si un candidat au visa est refusé. Pourriez-vous le lui annoncer plus rapidement, comme c'est le cas au USA et en Europe? On nous dit que le plus grand problème est le délai d'attente pour les résultats de l'application. Feel free to reply in English, doesn't matter. So in English, thank you for protecting our borders. Keep it up. The biggest problem is if a visa applicant is refused. Could you tell them more quickly, as is the case in the USA and Europe? We are told that the biggest problem is the wait time for the application result. So I'll start in English and I'll go in French. I'll say that is a bit of a tough one. We do respond basically as quick as we can. So visas are processed in line with visa processing times that are outlined by our IRCC on our website. We wish we could do it quicker. Unfortunately, it's just kind of where we are at this point. I think the best way for that is, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think it's really that event participants should apply as early as possible to account for possible delays along the way. And then obviously, should a visa be refused, participants can choose to reapply at that point. Donc, les visas sont traités conformément au délai fixé par IRCC. Nous recommandons aux participants à l'événement de déposer leur demande le plus tôt possible afin de tenir compte d'éventuels retards en cours de route. En cas de refus de visa, les participants peuvent choisir de déposer une nouvelle demande.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, next question. You mentioned that you work with different government agencies once the event is registered with you. Does it work the same way if an event application was submitted through CBSA?
Yes, so CBSA does have a similar process in place, and we are in communication with them as well.
Okay. Is the list of VATs available on the IRCC website?
Sorry, this was probably on me. It does refer to the visa application centers. And yes, there is a comprehensive list that can be found on IRCC's website.
Great. Suggestion number 1, biometrics is a problem. If it could be mandatory after the approval, it would facilitate the life of visitors. Sometimes they need to travel 5 to 6 hours to find a Canadian office processing biometrics. Then they are declined. If at least they could have a conditional approval prior to doing the biometrics, it would help a lot.
Unfortunately, I am not the person who can make the decision on the order of these things. Biometrics are required in order for a visa to be processed and for a final decision to be made. So luckily, biometrics are valid for 10 years once they've been provided. So although there's not a VAC in every country, they can attend any visa application center around the globe and provide their biometrics.
When and how are we supposed to send registration lists, especially if registration for the event is available online up to 1 month before the event?
So we recommend that they provide a participant list to our team roughly 2 months prior to the event start date. A template will be provided to the event organizer upon registration. We will warn you that international participants risk not receiving their visa in time if they apply 4 weeks in advance of their travel. So we do recommend 3 months, but we recognize that may not always be possible. But 4 weeks is cutting it a little close, so that's just how it is, unfortunately.
Right now.
Yeah, right now.
Here's another suggestion. Why not implementing, like in the USA, a fee-based last-minute request? In the US, you can pay $150 for a 7-day service.
Unfortunately, I also cannot speak to the different fees.
Above your pay grade? Is that what you're saying, Jackie?
Yes.
Could you please repeat what you said about speakers' registrations being prioritized if needed?
Jackie, you want me to go ahead? So I think for that, what we're trying to say is when you do submit a list of all your delegates that will be attending or people that received the invitation letter, I think if you do have some speakers or VIPs that are kind of integral to the success of the event, I think it's important that you note those to us, because essentially what will happen is when we use the word kind of prioritize in that sense, is what we're saying is that we might prioritize those VIPs that you've listed over the next people who are just participants in the event. So if it comes down to crunch time and we're only able to get to so many of the people, we're going to try to make sure that those people are kind of prioritized to ensure that they could attend the event.
Great. Is there a charge for the special event services?
No, it is completely free.
Your tax dollars at work. If our event is mainly Canadian based and we don't issue letters of invitation, is there a department or person to talk to if we see fraudulent letters of invitation?
Yep, IRCC Special Events Unit. We work with organizers who have visa required participants. And if you notice some fraudulent letters of invitation, you can let us know.
Great. We are planning 2 international meetings in 2024 in Canada. Do our attendees need to apply for visas for both meetings?
It largely depends. If the applicant was granted a multiple entry visa, it's likely that they will not need to apply twice, but that varies case by case. If their visa is still valid for time for the second event.
So when they get the visa, can they request something for two different meetings at one time?
Typically, no. A multiple entry visa is the decision, to issue a multi-entry visa is largely with the processing officer.
Okay.
I'll also jump in on that one just to mention we spoke a little bit about biometrics and how they are good for 10 years. So the good thing is even if they were to get a single journey visa or just single entry, they would not have to do their biometrics a second time. So that should make the process a lot easier and quicker.
Right. You've got a message from someone that's planning a One Young World Summit in 2024, and they're looking forward to working with you. And they have a few questions, but the first one is an immigration system for Canada's future. That's the announcement that the government made, stated a commitment to priority visa processing for those attending major conferences. Can you share a ballpark best case, worst case for processing times under these circumstances?
Sure. So IRCC Special Events Unit is currently focused on coordinating visa processing for event participants. Unfortunately, we're unable to tell what visa processing times will be like in 2024 as processing times continue to change as IRCC updates their process. We always recommend that event applicants apply early for their visas, and that's pretty much the advice we can provide.
And the second question that this person had is asking for a quick consult, but they'll need to go to the email address that Matthew had provided in order to try and set up a meeting. So please, Matthew Belshaw, please do that. Next question. For the event VIPs, do we email special.events@cic.gc.ca as well?
Yes, please send the VIP participants to the mailbox, and we will ensure that their visa applications are tagged accordingly for coordinated processing in relation to the event.
Right.
And we can relay this information to our processing offices for their awareness.
Great. If a delegate or attendee who applies using an invitation letter or event number enters Canada and then disappears and doesn't attend our event as expected, what is the potential risk or penalty, if any, to ourselves as organizers?
So there's no penalty for an organizer. However, organizers should inform IRCC immediately of any such occurrences in order for us to take appropriate action in regards to visa applications submitted for the event. Yes. And we're aware that a growing number of invitation letters are being fraudulently altered and submitted by visa applicants claiming to be registered participants. So organizers are strongly encouraged to submit a list of confirmed registered participants to IRCC using an attached template that we provide at the time of registration. And then officers can then use this list and consult it to confirm whether a participant is a genuine attendee to the event. So yes, providing us also with the visa application numbers also allows us to ensure that visa applications are tagged accordingly for coordinated processing to the event.
Okay. I think it was mentioned that even if it's too late for organizers to register their event, special events can still assist with the invitation letter. What's the process for asking for this assistance? Can organizers still send you their letter of approval, and can they still send you a list of their applicants?
I would say requests can be submitted, but they will be considered on a case-by-case basis, mostly because we are focusing on those events that are registered, but submit the request and we will see.
Okay.
We
sorry, Matt.
might need to increase our mailbox size with all the questions that people are going to be emailing us, but yeah, we're happy to get all these questions.
Well, it shows that there's still tremendous interest and questions about the process. So I'm really pleased to see so many people asking the questions. Next one, we've had a large number of people requesting an invitation letter. Our convention is Canadian based. Do we provide invitation letters, but our registration doesn't open until later, until after they request their letter? Does this hold up their visa application being delayed?
So we recommend that event organizers provide event participants with an invitation letter once a participant has registered for their event and paid the corresponding fees. We do recommend this method in order to prevent fraudulent use of invitation letters. So that's what I will say for that.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Do we need to apply for IRCC if we apply for an international events and convention services program?
Yes, because IRCC and CBSA, we have separate special event programs. So IRCC's special event unit focuses on supporting visa required participants, while CBSA's program assists with the importation of goods and stuff like that.
Great. Well, that is the end. Oh, no, there are a couple more. Are visa application letters applicable if registration is free to attend?
Yes, we recommend that they do provide visa invitation letters because they do help support the purpose of travel. So if they do need to apply for a visa, it would be beneficial for the participants to have that letter.
And I think it's going to be the last question. Just to clarify, should we be collecting attendees' application numbers?
Yes, we recommend that you do collect the visa application numbers and then that provide it to us. And that way we can tag those applications for coordinated processing.
Fantastic. That's it. All the questions. Thank you very much. There is one more. Okay, I'm going to make this the last question. If the delegates don't require visas, do you still encourage that a registration list be submitted?
I guess it depends. If your event delegates are largely ETA, then no, we focus on visa required participants. But if you do have delegates that require visas and up to 10, minimum of 10, then yes, we would say that to register your event and provide us with those registration lists overall.
Fantastic. I'm going to stop there. Unless you guys are you okay to stay another 5 minutes? Because there's two more questions.
Yeah, I think we're good.
We're good? Okay, we'll do two more and then we'll stop. If you have a free event sending invitation letters, you will receive 1,000 applications. Okay, just a comment. Next one, how can we track the visa application numbers if they need the invitation letter to apply for the visa?
So we would recommend that you, and I don't know how they could do it, but we would say that you would communicate with those delegates to recommend that after you've applied, please send us your visa application number, and that way you can pass it along to us.
Fantastic.
I think maybe the difference there is registering for the event versus like registering for a visa, right? So when they register for the event, they would then get the invitation letter, and then they could apply for the visa, and then that application number in a perfect world would get sent to us so that we could ensure that it's tagged to the event.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Matthew and Jacqueline. We so appreciate you taking the time to do this and answer so many questions. And I know that you're going to get more communication from people because there are a lot more questions out there. So just so everybody knows, we've already talked about perhaps doing a follow-up webinar in the first quarter of 2024 to try and keep up to speed with how IRCC is doing and answer any more questions you may have. So stay tuned for the next edition of the IRCC update webinar. And thank you for everyone that attended. And again, our thanks to Jacqueline and Matthew for being so great at presenting all the information that everyone wants to know and be willing to answer so many questions.
Thank you.